Here's something that should make you deeply uncomfortable. In 2018, in a tiny mountain village in Argentina, a 68-year-old man showed up to a birthday party feeling a little off. Maybe a fever starting, nothing he thought much about. 11 people ended up dead. The killer came from mouse droppings, literally mouse pee and poop. And here's what nobody talks about. This is the only hantavirus on Earth that can spread person to person. Every other version, dead end. But this one, it rewrote the rule book. And right now, it's making headlines again on a cruise ship in the middle of the Atlantic. Stick around, because this one is genuinely wild. And what you're about to learn, most people have absolutely no idea. Alright, let's back up. A lot of people hear Hantavirus and think it's that thing hikers get sometimes. Some 90s nature documentary scare. But that framing massively undersells this whole family of viruses. There are dozens of hantaviruses all over the world, Asia, Europe, North and South America, co-evolving with rodents for tens of thousands of years. Here's the basic transmission. Rodents carry hantaviruses permanently in their bodies, and they never get sick. The virus lives in their urine, their droppings, their saliva. When that stuff dries out and gets disturbed, like when you clean out an old shed, invisible particles float into the air. You breathe them in. And now it's your problem. Hantaviruses cause two main diseases in humans. In the old world, Europe and Asia, you get hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. It wrecks your kidneys. In the New World, the Americas, you get Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, and this one hits your lungs. Like, destroys your lungs. We'll get into that in uncomfortable detail shortly. For most of history, doctors in Asia had been documenting weird outbreaks, going back to World War II and Korea, hemorrhagic fever in soldiers, thousands of cases. No one knew what was causing it. Then in 1978, scientists finally isolated the culprit, named Hantaan virus, after the Hantaan River in South Korea where the outbreak was identified. First hantavirus ever discovered. Then came 1993, Four Corners region, where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. A young Navajo man in his early 20s, fit, healthy, collapsed suddenly, died from acute respiratory failure. Days later, his fiancée, same thing. She collapsed on the way to his funeral. She died too. The CDC scrambled. Epidemiologists flooded into the region. And in what I genuinely believe is one of the most impressive feats of rapid scientific detective work in modern history, they identified a completely unknown virus within weeks. They called it Sin Nombre, Spanish for the virus with no name. The carrier was the western deer mouse, and that year, the mouse population had exploded after an unusually wet spring. By the end of 1993, 48 confirmed cases of this new disease across the United States. Case fatality rate, 56%. That's more than half of the people infected, dead. Take a second with that number. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome was now on the map. But the scariest part of the story was still 2 years away, and it wasn't going to come from a desert in New Mexico. Real quick, before we get into what makes the Andes virus completely different from everything we just talked about, I want to ask you something. Drop it in the comments. Had you ever heard of the Andes hantavirus before watching this? Yes or no? I'm genuinely curious. Because most people I talk to have absolutely no idea this thing exists. Okay, let's keep going. Let's talk about Patagonia, southern Argentina and Chile. Stunning, remote, temperate rainforest and mountain steppe. The Andes Mountains cutting down the spine of the continent. And running through those forests and shrublands, a small rodent called Oligorhizomus longicaudatus, the long-tailed pygmy rice rat. Small, brownish, honestly kind of cute, which makes what it carries deeply ironic. The long-tailed pygmy rice rat is the primary reservoir for the Andes virus. And just like with Sin Nombre and the deer mouse, the rat carries the virus permanently and never gets sick itself. It just lives with it, does rodent things, scurries around Argentine farms and forests, leaving its droppings everywhere. Then, in 1995, scientists in Argentina confirmed a new hantavirus species from a patient who had died. They named it the Andes virus. Here's where everything diverges from every other hantavirus ever discovered. In 1996, just 1 year after the Andes virus was identified, there was an outbreak in El Bolsón, southern Argentina. 16 cases. And when epidemiologists looked at the data very carefully, they found something that made them genuinely stop and stare. The virus wasn't just jumping from rodents to people. People were getting it from other people. Every other hantavirus ever documented was a dead-end infection in humans. You catch it from a rodent. You do not spread it to the person next to you. That was considered a fixed biological certainty. The Andes virus said, "Rules are cute, I guess." Person-to-person transmission appears most efficient during a very specific window, around the time a person first develops a fever, the prodromal phase. And that window appears to be roughly 1 day of peak infectiousness. 1 day. But here's the terrifying catch. That window occurs before most people feel seriously ill. Just a fever starting, nothing dramatic. And yet, that can be enough. Now, why does the Andes virus do this when no other hantavirus does? What is biologically different about it? The honest answer is, we don't fully know yet. That question is still open, and scientists are actively working on it right now, which is both reassuring that people are studying this and mildly terrifying that an open question that important still doesn't have a complete answer. So, what actually happens inside you when the Andes virus gets in? Stage 1, the prodrome. This hits somewhere between 7 and 39 days after exposure. The median is around 18 days. So you could be infected, actively infected, for almost 3 weeks before feeling a single thing. 3 weeks. When symptoms do start, they start boring. Fever, fatigue, muscle aches, headache, abdominal pain. Sounds like literally every flu you've ever had. Nothing that would make you call a doctor immediately. And for about 40% of infected people, it stays relatively mild. But for the other 60%, that boring beginning is just the opening act. Then stage 2, cardiopulmonary syndrome. This is where everything goes wrong, fast. The Andes virus gets into the endothelial cells lining your blood vessels in the lungs, and it makes them leaky, not like a small drip, like a burst pipe. Fluid pours out of your capillaries into your lung tissue. You start drowning from the inside. Your blood pressure collapses, your heart fails, and it arrives in hours, not days. The case fatality rate for Andes virus? 30 to 40%. No approved antiviral. Treatment is just oxygen, a ventilator, hope. And the cruelest part, this virus hits hardest not at the elderly or immunocompromised. It kills young, healthy adults. Because the damage isn't only from the virus, it's from your own immune system going haywire fighting it. That is a biological cruel joke if I've ever heard one. Now let's go back to that birthday party, because the 2018 Epuyén outbreak is the most detailed documented case study we have of how dangerous this human-to-human transmission really is. Epuyen is a tiny village of roughly 2,000 people in Chubut province, deep in Argentine Patagonia. Beautiful, remote, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. In late October 2018, it was about to become the center of a medical emergency. November 3rd, 2018, the 68-year-old man was at a birthday party with about 100 other guests. A fever starting to come on. He felt tired, maybe achy. He spent 90 minutes there, passed someone near the restroom for just a few seconds. The epidemiology paper later described this as a superspreader event. One sick man, a 90-minute birthday party. and the chain reaction that followed killed 11 people. Between October 28, 2018 and January 20, 2019, 29 laboratory-confirmed cases of Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome in Epuyen alone. 11 people dead. The outbreak even spread into Chile when a healthcare worker who had visited Epuyen developed the illness and had cared for a confirmed case while she was in her own contagious window. Health investigators traced 3 distinct superspreader events within this one outbreak. So let's go deeper on the biggest scientific mystery here. We know person-to-person transmission happens. We have epidemiological evidence from multiple outbreaks. We have genetic sequencing showing near-identical viral sequences between people with no shared rodent exposure. But why does only the Andes virus do this? What makes it molecularly different? Scientists have hypotheses, but a complete answer? Not yet. One leading hypothesis is about the route of shedding. In rodents, hantaviruses shed in urine, feces, and saliva. But in humans, Andes virus has been detected in respiratory secretions, suggesting that when an infected person breathes or coughs in close quarters, viral particles may be present in the air. The Andes virus may replicate more effectively in human respiratory tissue in a way that other hantaviruses simply don't. In 2023, a landmark study published in the CDC's own Emerging Infectious Diseases journal modeled this in Syrian hamsters and actually demonstrated horizontal transmission between animals. Contact-infected hamsters caught it from inoculated ones. The hamster model confirmed what human outbreak data had long suggested. The virus is shed in a way that allows horizontal spread. And now scientists have a laboratory model to work with. Now, importantly, this does not mean the Andes virus is highly contagious in the way measles or COVID are. The transmission window is short. It requires fairly close contact during that peak fever period. Casual social exposure carries low risk. The WHO has consistently assessed current outbreak risk as low for the general global population. This isn't a pandemic pathogen yet, but it is unique, and it bears watching. Here's a piece of the story that gets almost no attention. The long-tailed pygmy rice rat, the primary carrier of the Andes virus, lives across a wide swath of Chile and Argentina, and climate change models suggest the range of that rodent is shifting as temperatures change in Patagonia. The environments suitable for this mouse are moving, which means the geographic range of Andes virus exposure is also potentially moving. And this is the part I want to make sure really lands. There is no approved antiviral treatment specifically for Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. There is no widely available vaccine. Treatment is aggressive supportive care, oxygen, ventilators, sometimes an ECMO machine that does the job of your heart and lungs while your body tries to fight back. Some people make it, many don't. The tools we have are basically try to keep you alive and hope your immune system figures it out. The 2018 Epuyén outbreak had one more twist that drove home just how serious human-to-human transmission can be. A healthcare worker who had visited the town and had cared for a confirmed case later traveled into Chile. She was in her own contagious phase. She didn't know it. The virus crossed an international border because a person crossed it, not a mouse, a person. When investigators characterized the 3 superspreader events in this outbreak, they all shared certain features: enclosed spaces, close contact, and people who were in that peak fever window of infectiousness. The Andes virus doesn't need a crowd. It doesn't need a sneeze. It appears to need proximity, duration, and that narrow infectious phase. That combination, plus the fact that sufferers may not know they're contagious, is what makes it so dangerous in tight community settings. Here's something I find genuinely remarkable, and it keeps coming up when you research hantavirus history. During the 1993 Four Corners outbreak, Navajo medicine men told CDC investigators that mouse overpopulations had historically preceded illness in their communities. Their oral tradition had been tracking this connection for generations. Modern science just hadn't formalized it yet. Indigenous ecological knowledge beat the laboratory by decades, and despite all of this, the Andes virus remains almost completely off the public radar. While the world tracks influenza strains, debates COVID variants, monitors Ebola and Marburg, this quiet, ancient virus keeps doing its thing in remote Patagonian villages and, apparently, now on cruise ships in the Atlantic. Not because it's less dangerous, but because it tends to kill in small, remote clusters. Out of sight, out of mind. Which brings us to right now. Like, actually right now, May 2026, a Dutch cruise ship, the MV Hondius, has been at the center of a Hantavirus cluster. 3 people dead, several others hospitalized. Illness onset across affected passengers occurring between late April and late May 2026. The World Health Organization issued a disease outbreak notice. Now, the WHO has assessed the global risk as low. Current evidence suggests the cluster involves both rodent origin exposure and potentially limited human-to-human spread. This is not a time for panic. The Andes virus is not about to become a global pandemic. But low global risk doesn't mean the individuals caught in an outbreak face low personal risk. For them, the fatality rate is still 30 to 40%. Here's what makes the cruise ship cluster especially significant. The ship had been traveling in regions known for Andes virus activity. Investigators are still working to determine whether passengers had rodent exposure on shore excursions, or whether some cases represent person-to-person spread aboard the vessel itself. That distinction matters enormously, because if the latter, it marks one of the first documented person-to-person Andes virus transmission events in a moving international vessel. The WHO has classified hantaviruses, the Andes strain specifically, as emerging pathogens with, quote, significant potential to trigger international public health crises due to their severity and case fatality rates of up to 40%. That is a direct quote from an official WHO assessment. This virus has been on their watch list. It's been on scientists' watch lists for 3 decades. It just doesn't make headlines between outbreaks. All right, let's land the plane. You came into this video probably knowing hantavirus vaguely, something hikers worry about in the American Southwest. That's the Nombre story from 1993, real and alarming in its own right. But what you know now is that there's a completely separate chapter, unfolding since 1995 in the mountains of South America. The Andes virus is the only hantavirus known to spread person to person. It's been doing so since at least 1996. It kills 30 to 40% of the people it seriously infects. It hits hardest at young, healthy adults. Its reservoir rodents range is shifting with climate change. There is no approved antiviral, no widely available vaccine, and it remains largely off the public radar. The birthday party in Epuyen happened because a 68-year-old man was running a fever and still showed up to celebrate someone he cared about. That's not a character flaw, that's just being human. Most people with a low-grade fever don't know they're contagious with something that has a 40% fatality rate. The Andes virus doesn't announce itself. It hides in the mundane, in a barn floor in New Mexico, in the dust of a rural shed in Argentina, in the brief warmth of a crowded Patagonian birthday party, in the ventilation of a cruise ship somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean right now. The Andes virus does its work quietly. It was doing this before most of us had ever heard of it. It will keep doing it, whether we pay attention or not. The difference now is that you know its name. Now here's what I find even more interesting, and what I'm covering next. The Andes virus is unusual, but it's not alone. There are other pathogens scientists are watching that have shown similar tendencies to break the dead-end rule. The science of why some viruses evolve the ability to jump between people is one of the most consequential questions in virology right now. That video is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. See you there.